We proudly present Professor Shahbaz, the Director of UNESCO Regional Science Bureau for Asia and Pacific, as the moderator. And we have here right now our two distinguished speakers, Dr. Ngo Sheau Shi, Senior Lecturer from the School of Communication, Universiti Sains Malaysia, and Ms. Noor Hayati Uteh, Chief of the International Educational Development Unit, Ministry of Education Malaysia. We are ready to take your questions through the Q&A box and at the Facebook page. If you wish to receive the certificate, please fill attendance in the attendance list, which we will share during the webinar. Professor Shahbaz, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I welcome our two guests today. So I request them to turn their cameras on so that we can have our interactive session. And please also unmute yourself. That's very good. Excellent. And we have with us Ms. Noor Hayati and Dr. Sheau Shi. So let me first of all begin that today we have a very transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary session. We have our colleagues, one, Ms. Noor Hayati, who is coming from the Ministry of Education as the chief of a very important unit, which is about international education development. And it has been a very important part of our efforts. So we will learn about education blueprint of Malaysia. We will learn also about global citizenship education and about PVE and how we have been linking in the region and with Africa. So most welcome, Ms. Noor Hayati. And with Dr. Sheau Shi coming from mass communication, from the media side of things, from Universiti Sains of Malaysia, has also been very, very active in the development of a handbook which deals with climate change and how the climate change related reporting should be done. So the work which links journalists to this very important area where natural sciences as well as social sciences, climate justice, involving communities, so many interesting things happen. To begin with, let me ask our dear colleague from the Ministry of Education, Ms. Noor Hayati, tell us what is this education blueprint and why it is important for Malaysia and how it came into MUCP.
Thank you very much,
Please.
Professor Shahbaz. Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this very important dialogue. Well, I think the Malaysia Education Blueprint, or what we call the MEB 2013-2025, is basically a long-term framework for the education transformation in Malaysia. So when we developed this, there was a lot of engagement that was carried out to ensure that the blueprint is relevant and it will be sustainable for the period of time. So when we developed this, we even had engagement with UNESCO Paris, where they carried out a review of our education policies in Malaysia. And we engaged with so many stakeholders while developing in the development of this blueprint. We had various town halls and so on. From the inputs that we gathered, that's where the blueprint was started. So it is a very holistic blueprint that look at 5 system aspirations, which we hope through this development of the blueprint and through the various initiatives and strategies, we will be able to strengthen our system aspiration. There are 5 system aspirations, which is access, quality, equity, unity, and efficiency. So, and on top of that, we also have 6 students' aspirations, whereby at the end of the day, when the student leave the school, they will have leadership qualities, leadership skills. They will have a bilingual proficiency. They will be equipped with thinking skills, knowledge, ethics, and spirituality. And also they have this sense of national identity. So this blueprint is divided into 3 segments, which we call 3 waves. So wave 1 has concluded. We are now at the second wave, which will be concluding at the end of this year. So next year will be the 3rd wave. So for each year, for each wave, we will be reviewing and see where we can strengthen, what are the gaps. So it is a very enriching development in a sense that we keep on reviewing as we progress. So that's what the blueprint is to us.
Yeah, and Ms. Noor Hayati, if you can mention when did you start this blueprint and until when is this blueprint?
The blueprint will end in 2025. So it started,
2020.
yeah, started in 2013. But the work started very much earlier, even in 2010. So it was a long process.
So 2010 started implementation 2013 will go to 2025. So it's a very big effort. So
Yes,
it's about transforming education system in Malaysia to bring all those very important areas of equity, quality, and
quality.
fairness, and making sure the students have the right skills. Uh, is it for a certain level of education or for all levels of education?
We have two blueprints, but for my sector, we are looking at the basic sector. So it is from preschool right until post secondary, and then
From
it will be carried. Yeah, and then we also have the blueprint for the higher education sector. So
and the
there is a
period is the
continuity.
same period 2013 to 2025. So very exciting transformation of education in Malaysia, and we already see very good results. The universities are doing a wonderful job. There are many things happening. The universities are moving to top tier universities. The education system is pushing the limits. So now tell us, how did it link with Malaysia UNESCO cooperation program?
Right. When we started this UNESCO cooperation program, I think UNESCO Bangkok was the one who contacted us. They wanted to come in 2016. They wanted to come up with a project called Strengthening National Capacity for Sector-Wide Planning to Achieve the SDG 4 in the Asia Pacific. So what UNESCO Bangkok wanted to do was they wanted to enhance participants' capacity to develop and implement evidence-based. That's what the blueprint is all about. It's evidence-based,
Mm.
result-oriented education. And we also wanted, at the same time, when we developed this project, we also want to connect the dots between the Malaysia Education Blueprint and the SDG 4. Because I think when we map out what we have in the SDG 4 and what we have with the blueprint, there is some sort of alignment, because
Mm.
as it is, the 5 aspirations itself is already there. So it was like there was an alignment. So that's how it started. So we gather experts who were involved in the development of the blueprint to provide insights and to share their experiences. And we even have the higher education to be part of the development, to be part of this project with UNESCO Bank.
Okay, that's very good. So from the beginning, from 2010, there is a lot of work has been done, and in the process, UNESCO has been contributing. So when the Malaysia UNESCO cooperation program came on board, this blueprint is one of the areas which many countries also wanted to learn. So I remember a particular project we had with Bhutan and with our New Delhi office. So that's one link, and of course with the Bangkok office and evidence base and the workshop. So we will come back to some of those ideas. So of course within Asia Pacific there is a lot of need for this cooperation, and also with Africa. So thank you, Ms. Noor Hayati, for starting this discussion. Now let me move to Dr. Sheau Shi, who is in Penang today, and she is in University Science Malaysia, very important university. We have many programs with the university, including in the area of water, and we have previously discussed some of the ideas with also culture there. So, dear Dr. Sheau Shi, you are involved in a very important other aspect of UNESCO program, what we call communication and information.
Yes.
And there has been a handbook which you helped produce. what we call Handbook for Journalists for Climate Change Reporting. Can you please tell us what is that and what has been your role in that?
Okay. Yeah, I'm involved in the production of a guidebook for journalists, particularly addressing to Asian and the Pacific region. So the initial strategy was to actually adapt from a UNESCO guidebook, which had already been published in 2013 for the particularly for journalists in Africa. So
Mm.
this particular guidebook was actually produced by International Institute for Environment and Development together with the Internews Earth Journalism Network. So it was a very well-researched guidebook that covers the knowledge, skills, and resources that journalists need to know about climate change and relate that to their African audiences. So obviously for our project, we need to make sure that the content of our adapted handbook are relatable to Asian and also the Pacific audiences. So the biggest challenge was to make sure that a broader coverage on climate change issues and examples are related to all the Asian and also Pacific country would be represented in the handbook. So in other words, we've been, in the very initial stage, we've been thinking of what would be the best mechanism for us to be more inclusive in order to make sure that the interests of all sectors of societies are addressed in the handbook. So luckily, Dr. Lim Ming Kwok, I believe is your colleague from UNESCO Jakarta. He had played a very important role to serve as the main communication hub, gathering a wide range of experts consisting of journalists, civil society group, academics, as well as students from the regions, and to come together. We do a lot of brainstorming, revisiting, and reconceptualizing the key issue of quality communications, journalism, and storytelling on sustainable development, as well as climate change within the context of Asia and the Pacific region. So the process was more like a snowballing process
Mm.
because in the early and mid 2017, we started with 2 local workshops on telling the story on climate, on global change in general. So both University of Nottingham Malaysia campus and also Universiti Sains Malaysia were partnering with UNESCO Jakarta. We brought together mainly the local experts from Malaysia, and only later in November 2017, we organized a regional workshop. This time we invited environmental journalists, climate modeling scientists, environmental policy experts, as well as science communicator, academics from Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, the Philippines, Nepal, China, Australia, New Zealand, Fiji. So
Wow, that must be very interesting for you to meet people
it
from
was,
so many backgrounds and from many countries.
yes, it was a very exciting moment because,
Yeah.
yeah, and but
Okay, if I can ask you a
Mhm.
follow-up question here, can
Sure.
you tell us the background of those people a bit more? Because climate change is a complex issue which is affecting everyone's life. Of course, we have this COVID pandemic which is affecting and has affected our life in a very bad way, and we need to come out of it and be stronger, more resilient. Climate change stays also as a big challenge.
Mhm.
Climate change needs people from the climate sciences, people from the social sciences, people who are doing journalism, people who may be understanding the interlinkages. What was the background of those people who were involved in this project? As you mentioned with Dr. Lim and Jakarta, from where these people come? What were their backgrounds?
Um, a lot of them are actually journalists because we are mainly wanting to get their experiences on the ground. Because through the journalists talk to people from all walks of life. They mainly
Mm.
talk to the climate scientists, the modeling scientists, and so on and so forth. So from there, we get the story of other parts of the world.
Okay, so
Yes.
mainly journalists, but you also have some people who could give us better understanding. What is your view of the level of understanding among journalists about the scientific aspects of climate change? Do they really understand what these modelers are saying?
When we discussing about it, the biggest challenge for all of us is actually the scientists been talking some very scientific language. the vocabulary and so on. So we find that for normal people like us, we don't really understand what they're talking about. So this is where we find, okay, now journalists has to play a role to tell the story by using a layman term so that it makes sense to everybody. What exactly is this, climate change in general? Yeah.
So we needed to bring that knowledge to the understanding of the journalists. And journalists may think they are like normal people, but the scientists may think they are normal scientists. So we need to bring some common understanding. That's very interesting. That's a very good way to start explaining about this. So you have a handbook which came the other way around. Rather than from Asia going to Africa, we have some work of UNESCO in Africa, which you customized for Asia. Is this correct, Dr. Sheau Shi? So we brought it from Africa here. So through MUCP, we brought the knowledge from Africa to Asia.
Yeah, correct.
Was it good quality work already? Did you need to do a lot more for Asia?
We don't need to do a lot, but the journalists, the participant for the regional conference was very useful because we have all these people from all the regions. So they actually give us a lot of updated, because the previous one was published in 2013. And this particular conference was held in 2017, and the book is published by end of 2018. So apparently there's about 5-6 year, 4-5 years gap. So we need a lot more updated information, especially when it comes to climate solution and sciences, the new sciences and all that. Yeah.
So there was a body of knowledge which needed to be updated with the most recent scientific information, but also from the point of view of the developments in the areas of journalism. Thank you very much. And this has been a handbook which is available, dear colleagues, through our website. Mr. Hazlan will put a link for you if you want to explore it. And those colleagues who have joined us on Zoom and on Facebook Live, most welcome to put your questions, queries in chat box, or question answers or comments. We will be asking Dr. Sheau Shi and Ms. Noor Hayati to answer them individually. So you will get with your name the answer we will put on our sustainability insight. So I will come back to you, Dr. Sheau Shi. So this is very interesting experience for us, that there was a body of knowledge already used in Africa, and we bring it to Asia. And we have the benefit of this transdisciplinary approach, and we needed to bring knowledge to the level where common people can understand. So that's very important. So now, Ms. Noor Hayati, you have this education blueprint, which started 2013, will go, inshallah, as we say, to 2025, and it will make Malaysia very proud, and education system would be excellent. I learned from you that there has been some link also with Africa. Can you please tell us the link with Africa, which has been established through the projects from Malaysia UNESCO Cooperation Group?
Following from the first project on the sector-wide planning to achieve SDG 4, which we worked closely with UNESCO. Last year, we were approached once again by UNESCO Bangkok to actually collaborate, to co-partner with UNESCO Bangkok in the Asia-Africa Inter-Regional Seminar on SDG 4, which specifically looked at the literacy program carried out by the various Asia and African countries involved. So it's basically looking at youth and adult literacy in the framework of lifelong learning for all. So it is actually MUCP top up, which we call it MFIT Plus project, and it's focused on literacy. So literacy. Look at the discourse was mainly on empowering the marginalized group, especially women. So in that seminar, we had a lot of sharing between participants, and Malaysia as well. We worked closely with the community, the KEMAS, which is KEMAS is the Community Development Department, which carries out a lot of literacy program for the marginalized group, especially women. And also we work with the Sarawak Library. They carried out a lot of programs as well, especially programs to empower women on literacy, especially on functional literacy. And we worked also with Vocational Training Opportunity Center that actually provide training, vocational training for the marginalized group, the Orang Asli and other marginalized group. So it was a good platform where we actually had a kind of exchange of ideas and sharing of best practices. And we learn a lot in a sense that from our African counterparts as well on the various programs that they carried out. So it was a very engaging seminar, although it was only carried out for 3 days.
Yeah. So where was this seminar organized, Ms. Noor Hayati?
It was organized last year, September last year, and in Kuala Lumpur, where we wanted to invite more our counterparts from the African countries, but I think we had a lot of issues with the logistic arrangements. So in the end, I think about only 6 countries managed to come.
Do you remember those countries, Ms. Noor Hayati?
Yeah. I think we have participants from Benin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mozambique.
Wow.
Cote d'Ivoire. Gambia, and Niger, and Senegal.
Wow, wonderful. So it must be amazing for them to come to Malaysia and learn about Malaysia. I'm sure they must have shown a lot of interest in your blueprint as well. Did you talk blueprint other than literacy? What was their level of understanding? How do you find them in terms of their ability to learn from your efforts?
I think during that seminar, the sharing was much more on the projects carried out by the community college in Malaysia, because we focus on youth and adult literacy. So we carried, which was part of the blueprint actually. It's part of the lifelong learning, because we have this lifelong learning blueprint. So that's what we shared with the members of the participants. But I think one of the highlights was we took them to this vocational this VOTC, Vocational Opportunities Training Center, which has been in existence for 25 years. And they were supported by it's a non-governmental organization, and they managed to sustain, and they have been providing education, lifelong education, informal education for women. So that was the highlight of it was a learning process as well for us in the Ministry of Education.
Okay, that's really wonderful. So the colleagues who came from Africa, they could physically visit the facilities, they could talk to you, they could learn what you've done. They must have a lot of their own knowledge, which you may have found very useful for your own program. Is this correct, Ms. Noor?
Yes, I think we learned from our like one of from Cote d'Ivoire, which they shared one of their projects that they use the messaging system, the SMS, which we call it, to teach the people in Africa on how to read their literacy program. So that was something very, very useful for us, because even now with the COVID pandemic, when schools were closed, we had a lot of difficulty in reaching out to children with no connectivity and so on. So I think it somehow, when I reflected, I think the what has been used by the African colleague was very useful, in the sense that even without connectivity, you can still use the text messaging system to actually teach our children. So I think some of our teachers even utilize that platform to actually teach our children when schools were closed.
So
So I
certainly there is a benefit of South-South cooperation then.
exactly,
From
yeah.
Cote d'Ivoire, we get some knowledge from the SMS and
Yes.
they're using education system. They could visit our facilities in Malaysia. So there was a benefit for them to learn what is going on, link with the education blueprint. So this is a win-win situation for both sides, in my
Yeah.
view. So
Even
thank
now,
you for, yeah, please.
even now he's still sharing with us his updates on his project for RBC. So it was the linking is still there, the networking is still there, which is really lovely.
So the network is already established, so they know whom to contact, and you can contact. So this network and this friendship and association through South-South cooperation, it continues. That's really very good
Yeah,
to learn.
yeah.
Okay,
In
so I
fact,
will
if
come
I
back to you, Ms. Noor Hayati.
yes,
I have some more questions about global citizenship education and prevention of violent extremism, which we have also been working in related to these programs. So let me now move to Dr. Sheau Shi. Dr. Sheau Shi, you said this is an effort which bring many disciplines, but of course very strongly the colleagues from the communication information, especially the journalists who are part of it. Climate change is a topic which needs attention to all groups. As our colleague Ms. Noor Hayati has mentioned, Orang Asli and their views and input into literacy programs. So here we also need all communities to understand, and the concept of social justice, climate justice, those concepts come in. Can you please give us idea, especially this concept of inclusiveness and leaving no one behind and the climate justice kind of idea? How did you discuss and how did you incorporate into the handbook?
Okay. Yeah, because one of the main essential aspects of the handbook is actually to lay the foundation of theory for us to discuss about climate change, to contextualize it within the contemporary context, right? So there are essentially we are using climate justice, or rather climate injustice, which referring to the vulnerable community. And it is important for us to be reminded again that under the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, nearly 200 nations have agreed to prevent or avoid dangerous climate change according to the principle of common but differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities. Yeah. So this is very important for us because the country and communities that are most at risk from the impact of climate change are those that have contributed least to the problem, historically speaking, and are least able to adapt in many cases. So science continue to show that as the impact of climate change accelerates, extreme weather events are taking a major toll in developing countries. So particularly in Africa, Asia, as well as the small Pacific island. So this concept of climate justice requires all nations to share the burden as well as the benefit of climate change equitably as well as fairly. So there have been a lot of creative, viable scientific proposal to reduce emission of greenhouse gases, which are mainly developed and coming from the developed nations. And which is also important for us now to recognize that the solution to climate change must go hand in hand with ending poverty and other deprivations such as in health, education, digital divides, and so on. So, when we are talking about orang, anak-anak orang asli, the children to the least developed and marginalized community, they don't even have access to water or clean water or electricity, not to mention, to use online digital platform to go for education. So how do we include them in this entire process? And if we are using climate justice as a framework to discuss about all this issue, then things will fall into perspective that the responsibility of making sure that no one is left behind is actually should be bought by all parties, including the nation, a lot more developed nations. So I think, in other words, what we are emphasizing a lot in this handbook is that the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which you have the 17 sustainable goals, are very important for us to be acted upon, and both by the developed as well as the developing country in a global partnerships. That's,
Yeah.
yeah.
So basically, one is to understand this climate justice at a macro, at the level of the world, where who is causing the emissions, who is at the receiving end. So that's very important in terms of the framework, but also bring it down to the level of the communities.
Yeah.
And both of you colleagues have mentioned Orang Asli. Those colleagues who do not know Orang Asli, this is the terminology in Malaysia, which is about indigenous people. Is that correct, Dr.
Yeah.
Sheau Shi?
Indigenous
Yeah.
communities. Yeah.
Indigenous communities who, let's say, if we are protecting the forest, the indigenous local communities have their livelihood there as well. So we need to carefully understand the elements of poverty, as you mentioned, and understand how to make sure they are fully empowered and engaged in any solutions which are proposed. And also at the same time, when issues are being reported, the reporting is in the proper framework. So you mentioned this 2030 agenda and the sustainable development goals. In your view, with this handbook and about the responsible reporting for climate change, how it helps with the SDGs, which particular SDGs it can help, and what can be the broader role for the communication, information, the work we have been doing? How can we help SDGs?
I think SDG almost cover every aspect of social injustice in humans' life. So on that ground, I think we don't have to go to other places to look for solution. We just have to follow what has been suggested, and we just need to act upon it. Just implement what has been there out there and keep improving it by taking into consideration of a lot of local kind of like feedbacks to it, and keep perfecting the kind of mechanism. So I think the key issue here is that how do we keep closing the gap while we are seeing that the gap between the rich and the poor, the gap between the have and have nots, the gap between those who are actually can go to Mars anytime if they want to, compared to those who don't even have access to electricity, is becoming wider and wider. So it's
So it's
becoming,
about social inequalities.
yes,
The social inequalities. So how do we deal with them? So that's where 2030 agenda as a whole will benefit from better informed journalism, right?
yep, and
Reporting
also
of
education. Yeah.
and the education. So both of these areas are very. So I have a particular question also to you in terms of there are also social inequalities among researchers, among institutions. Uh, at a personal level, how the MUCP has helped you, Dr. Sheau Shi, as a professor from USM? How did it help you in your own development?
Um, well, I guess when we were working on the the guidebook, right, we get a lot of the main contributors for the guidebook are actually coming from colleagues from all over the regions through the conference, through the regional conference, and with their experience on the ground as well as their geographically specific knowledge, that they are willing to share unselfishly as well as very generously. Whatever we ask them, they will just share the information with us. And even after the workshop, right, after the regional workshop, a lot of them were still writing into us, keep updating us what happened, but making sure that we have the latest, kind of like information to be included in the book. So, some of them even offered to help in rewriting and editing sections of the books, and some of them lends their creative photograph to be included in the book, and so this is when I personally feel that I'm suddenly become part of this global citizen, doing something together, be part of the solution of climate change, and knowing that we could do it together is important and hopeful at this challenging time for me. Yeah.
No, that's really very interesting aspect for us. One of the main aims for the MUCP was, of course, the South-South cooperation you have mentioned, Dr. Sheau Shi. So you have this network, people who are dealing with similar challenges. They work together, they contribute to SDGs, leaving no one behind at an ethical level, personal level, but also very importantly, there is a personal, professional development and development of Malaysian institutions, that you can now feel you are part of a global movement with so many of those professionals who are willing to work with you. Is this correct? You feel like you are part of a much bigger network than before.
Yes, of course, yes.
So
Yes.
that was really the objective also for us, that how do we make sure how we bring more of Malaysia to the world, at the same time we connect the world to Malaysia. So thank you for that insight. And you mentioned global citizen. That's a very important terminology. So I may move to Miss Noor Hayati, because we have a global citizenship education, and there has been similar kind of efforts made by our office in Bangkok and our Ms. Noor Hayati. Can you please tell us what is global citizenship education and how you have contributed, how Malaysia has contributed towards that through this program and other programs, Ms. Noor Hayati?
Okay. I have to go back to our Malaysia blueprint. When we were doing the mapping of our Malaysia education blueprint with the SDG 4 targets, notice that there is some form of gap. There is a gap in the sense that the global citizenship education is not clearly mentioned in the blueprint. And of course, it's it's one of the targets, 4.7. And if you look at the targets, it's so wide, and it's at the beginning of when we looked at this, we were a bit lost. But I think it was somewhere in 2016, we had a seminar workshop in Bangkok, and Malaysia was one of the countries selected to be one of the pilot countries for implementing global citizenship education through the training of teachers. So what we did was we wanted to be we do not want to disrupt the already developed curriculum in Malaysia at that time. So what we did was we try and embed elements of global citizenship into the curriculum in 4 subjects: math, science, history, and geography. Where what we did was it started in late 2018, where we mapped our curriculum, the secondary, lower secondary curriculum, with the learning objectives of the global citizenship education, where we looked at the 3 pillars: the cognitive, social, emotional, and the behavioral domains. And then we mapped them out, and we came out with projects for students to carry out. And these projects are aligned with it's aligned with the units in the curriculum. So we are already at the final stage at the moment, and climate change is one of the topics that what we want we are introducing. What we want is basically for the children to look at what is happening at home within their context, and to link it with the issues globally. If it's climate change, they will have to come up with a project that is within their context and then look at the bigger picture. Or it could be the other way, something big and then linking it with the issues that is happening in their context. So we are at the final stage, and hopefully at the end of this month, we will be uploading our project lesson plans in the portal, our Delima portal, which is our digital learning platform portal, which will be accessible to all teachers and students.
That's really very interesting. If we can summarize, so this aspect of global citizenship education, understanding who we are, where we are, bringing local context to the global challenges like climate change, the issues of water, the issues related to environment. So very interesting. So this aspect, if I've collected correctly, Ms. Noor Hayati, it came because of the link with the global efforts also, that Malaysia blueprint benefited to bring the global citizenship education into the blueprint. Because of this program, it was enhanced. So that's a benefit for Malaysia. Would you agree with me?
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah,
So
that's really very important for us to learn that we have benefited to bring global understanding, global citizenship education into the blueprint.
so we
Okay,
are.
I have, yeah, so that's wonderful. I have another quick question. There is another very important concept, which is what we call PVE, prevention of violent extremism, a very big area for the world that we must avoid the extremism. We need peace in the world. We need sustainable development in the world. These are very important areas for the United Nations system. Can you tell us about PVE and how this program has helped us, and with your efforts, other efforts, how can we learn from each other about prevention of violent extremism?
Okay, I think PVE, it all started last year when there was a lot of discussion during the executive board meeting in Paris. So when they came back, they thought that we felt that, it's high time that we talk about PVE through education. That means prevention
Hmm.
of violent extremism through education. So it is something very new to us. So what we did last year was, with the help of various partners, strategic partners, police, we worked with so many people. We came up with a symposium where we invited educators and youth to highlight the importance of PVE. But what we wanted to do was we wanted them to get to expose them to the current issues on PVE. So following from that, we had a few discussions with UNESCO Bangkok and UNESCO Paris. And in fact, even last year, United Nations UNODC came and they carried out a situational analysis in the education sector. And they came up with a few recommendations on how we could escalate initiatives on PVE. So at the moment, what we plan to do is we wanted to um, look at how we could introduce um, empathy-based curriculum for teacher trainers in the framework of PVE. So it is still very new to us. So we are getting help from some of our strategic partners to help us develop this curriculum for teacher educators, so that it will. We feel that teacher educators, the training institutes of teachers, will be the core people who will help us develop this curriculum-based, the empathy-based curriculum, so that the whole idea of PVE will be cascaded to the pre-service teachers, and then it will be cascaded to the students at the end of the day. So basically what we wanted to introduce is to ensure that children are equipped with the thinking skills and they are aware of the global challenges related to PVE. It is a
Very
very sensitive area in topics in Malaysia because of our diverse culture and so on. So that's why we are engaging with the various sectors in the divisions as well, and with other ministries as well. And we are getting the help of UNESCO Paris as well as UNESCO Bangkok to help us
good.
on this.
Well, that's really very good to know. It's important. And I learn also you're working with the Philippines in this area as well. So there must be a lot of South-South cooperation, which is possible within the region close by.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, that's very good. So I'm coming more or less to the end of our interaction. I have one more question to cover with you. Ms. Noor Hayati, you have given us idea of global citizenship education. We have managed to benefit the Malaysia blueprint, education blueprint. And PVE is the very important concept, which is under development, very sensitive area, need to be done very carefully. And there are possibilities. And of course, the sustainable development goal number 4. What would be your message for the program if we continue into future? What should we do and what can we do better? You were also at UNESCO's General Conference where we had a side event and there was huge excitement in the room. There is so much expectation from the membership. Can you please also give idea about what did you learn in Paris when you were there, when we were presenting this, and what can be the future directions which can help Malaysia and help the world through South-South cooperation?
Well, I was overwhelmed when we were in Paris. I think we gathered a lot of interest from the participants itself, because I think I believe MUCP, this operation, is so it cuts across education, the social aspects, and so on. I think listening to what our Dr. Ngo just mentioned just now is so interesting. So I think I believe for this to sustain, we should bring in more partnerships, especially the private entities. When we carried out our programs, the 2 projects, we managed to gather a lot of interest, even among our local strategic partners, the NGOs and the private sectors. And they were willing to come up with funds to actually top up whatever is not enough. So I think MUCP is already a brand, especially when it is tied with UNESCO. And when I carried out these 2 projects, the moment I mentioned UNESCO, I managed to get the interest of all of the partners that I worked with. So I think we should go beyond. We should be engaging more private sectors to perhaps help with the contribution. And another thing is, I believe that it should be, whatever programs that we carried out, it has to be relevant to all parties. It has to be in the interest of everybody across the globe. So does that answer your question?
No, this really is a very good summary that we need to be relevant. There is excitement. MUCP is a brand. And I'm very pleased to know and very grateful for your insight, Ms. Noor Hayati, that people feel excited with the name UNESCO. And I hope they continue to do so. That's only possible if we do very good work. And work of UNESCO is our collective work, and we continue. So with that, if I can move for my final questions to Dr. Sheau Shi. Dear Dr. Sheau Shi, this handbook, very interesting, with this handbook you have described to us the principles related to climate justice and the networks which have been found and the transdisciplinary approach which has been taken, the work which has come from Africa updated with the most recent knowledge. In your view, what can we do more with this handbook, and how can we make MUCP more inclusive for researchers like you? Give them more chance. What would be your views on how should we go from where we
are? Thanks for the question, dear Professor Shahbaz. I think the handbook is currently being used in quite a number of places. I think Indonesia Tempo Institute have developed it into an open online course, and they use that as a training purposes for journalists, young journalists, and also students. And ABU, Asia Pacific Broadcasting Union, also kind of like using this handbook in the context of their training workshop for journalists. And myself also use this in my own curriculum, in my one of the subjects, international reporting. So I make this a compulsory reading for all the students. So they will have to come on board and keep building on the local knowledge. But by and large, I think a lot of the information and resources that are available in this handbook can be used even within the context of education, general education at tertiary, at secondary as well as primary levels. So there are all these different levels of using it because it's very easy to understand. The handbook is like written in the layman language and so on. So that's what that's why I'm so proud of promoting it.
It's really a very good piece of work, and I'm very proud to learn from your achievement and the network you have. We are in the process of establishing, with the help of REDAC, the institute which is in
Yeah.
USM.
Mm-hmm.
The people working in the area of water, they want to establish a UNESCO chair. I think this work can also be useful for bringing a transdisciplinary approach within USM, and the chair should be broader than USM. So can you please also guide me how we can promote this transdisciplinary approach to have more centers of excellence in Malaysia, in your view, and the role for I would say, as you as a middle career researcher, how can you continue to push this area, and how can UNESCO and MUCP can help you?
I think if we have a chair in setting up a chair in USM, because USM is a science-based university, so we actually have a lot of scientists who are working on the area of climate change. So for us to come in as journalist perspective or communicator perspective, we can help them to communicate the latest science, the local science in terms of around the parameter of climate change as well as climate solution. So I think we can even set up a communication center just to communicate climate issues by
That's
building
really very interesting. So
yeah by
you are already thinking there can be a bigger effort, maybe a climate information
yes,
center. That's very interesting. Yeah.
yeah,
And
just
do you find any barriers to you to expand yourself?
myself
Yeah, as an individual, do
as
you
an
find any? Yeah,
well, I'm happy if I find myself useful to the society. Yeah,
yeah.
so
But
that
through this program and with the networks you have, it should also help to boost your overall, I would say, academic credentials and confidence. You can do a lot more if you link with more people and with the right
yeah,
team.
yeah,
Would you agree with that?
yes, of course I should do more. More responsibility should.
I have a really, our interview is almost to the end, but I have another pointy question to you, Dr. Sheau Shi. I remember you also contributed to our synthesis, and you are a very proactive person. With Malaysia and the academic institutions where they are going, how can we promote more transdisciplinary approach? How can we get people out of their let's say the ivory towers and they feel excited by working together? How can we promote such an approach uh, by bringing more institutions together? Of course, USM is a great university, but there must be many others who can learn from you. How can we promote such an approach to be more inclusive with researchers?
Yeah, I think the multi-stakeholders approach is very important because when we are engaging with the society as well as the professional group like journalism and also the CSO, the civil society groups, then we are complementing with each other in the sense that you get a lot of local knowledge from the people, you get a lot of policy kind of like guidance from the policymakers, and also from the civil society group to kind of like suggestion for better change to equip ourselves better, kind of like prepare ourselves to face climate change challenge. And of course at university we have the most we can access to student. That's where we can bring students together, engage with the larger multi what do you call that, cultural background kind of like communities. And then also with UNESCO is also part of it, then we can feel that we are part of the bigger projects and solution as well. That's my
Your That's wonderful. Your last message for MUCP from
My
today.
last message. Yeah, keep on working together. I think together we become stronger. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And if I can ask Ms. Noor Hayati for the final message, you have given us so much knowledge today. I'm very proud of both of you. What would be your last message for today, Ms. Noor Hayati?
I would agree that continue this very healthy partnership. We have to continue this for the
Oh,
greater good of everyone. Yeah.
okay, thank you very much. So we come to the end of today. I am very, very grateful for this exciting interaction with Ms. Noor Hayati, the Chief of the International Education Development from the Ministry of Education, and Dr. Ngo Sheau Shi from USM, senior lecturer and very bright researcher who is certainly going to make Malaysia very proud. So both of you have given us many, many ideas today. So first of all, education blueprint is very important for Malaysia, which has been described very capably by Ms. Noor Hayati. Effort started in 2010, started implementation in 2013, will continue to 2025. But in this journey of creating quality education, bringing all the fairness and the important aspects of how we go to the next level at all levels of education is a great effort of Malaysia. But through this blueprint, many other countries have also benefited. And we have learned also the link with Africa, with the education blueprint and evidence-based education policy, very important. But at the same time, we have learned that there can be efforts in other parts of the world, like the example from Cote d'Ivoire and SMS and messaging. The ideas can be useful here in Malaysia as well. The facilities which are here, they are wonderful to be visited and to be learned together. Also, the new areas which are coming, for example, the global citizenship education blueprint can benefit from the efforts of UNESCO in Paris, in Bangkok, in Jakarta, and other places. So that's another important aspect of MUCP, bringing UNESCO offices together, working with the Ministry of Education and colleagues. And now with the concept of prevention of violent extremism, very sensitive area, but very important area, discussed at UNESCO's executive board and is being looked very carefully. How can we bring it in the right context in Malaysia and in the process link with other countries? So that's very important area which must continue, and it's good for Malaysia certainly, but at the same time it benefits other nations, and we have those networks which are already there. People can work with each other, can call upon each other. So that's the summary coming from Ms. Noor Hayati's interventions and very capably described. Then, of course, Dr. Sheau Shi from USM today in Penang has described to us this handbook, which is for the journalists related to this area of climate change reporting. How can we bring the right kind of scientific knowledge, but how do we bring the concepts to a lay person and to the understanding of the journalist so there can be responsible reporting? How do we bring the climate justice concept from the level of the whole world, from the point of view of who is having more emissions and who is at the receiving end? But at the same time, how do we bring them to the common person, like the Aboriginal people who may be having difficult issues for their livelihood as well, but also how do we bring a multi-stakeholder approach? There are benefits for individuals involved in MUCP, and certainly Dr. Sheau Shi has given us idea that there is a lot of excitement of these new networks working together, being part of the bigger global community, trying to solve challenges which need efforts beyond borders. So that's very important aspect of our work. And also the handbook which has been developed here, which can be used by many other nations. It came from Africa, updated with the most recent knowledge. The work coming from UNESCO offices and our headquarters help us bring more customized knowledge at the local level. And this continues into future, and the networks are already there. There is benefit for both Asia and Africa, but at the same time, at the individual level. So also there can be centers of excellence like a UNESCO chair, which is being proposed by USM, that can also benefit from such kind of communication knowledge, and there can be better networks within universities at the local level, between universities, across countries, and that's where we have to work together to solve these big challenges. And that's the purpose of MUCP, South-South cooperation for better peace, for sustainable development, for progressing all areas of UNESCO. Lastly, as was described by Ms. Noor Hayati, when we had this event in Paris with the member states of UNESCO at the General Conference from MUCP, there is so much excitement about this program. There is a lot of lessons learned which can be useful for promoting peace and sustainable development to all mandates of UNESCO. So we thank our colleagues, Ms. Noor Hayati, for bringing so many insights from that conference and excellent contribution at the General Conference. And we wish best of luck to Dr. Sheau Shi. She makes us proud and makes Malaysia proud, and all those colleagues who are working with her. So with that, I thank both of you again. Over to you, dear Hazlan.
Thank you, Professor Shahbaz and Dr. Ngo, Ms. Hayati, and to all the participants. Our coming next session will be on water, from water management to water economy, will be broadcasted live this coming Thursday on 8 October. Please don't forget to fill the attendance list through the link at the chat box and Facebook if you wish to receive the certificate. We keep this form open 1 hour from now on. For further information, please visit our Sustainable Insight Facebook page, our MCP Facebook page, and our Instagram. We wish you a good day, stay safe, and see you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Hazlan. And we will answer the questions in a usual way through Ms. Noor Hayati and Dr. Sheau Shi. So thank you for all who have given us their questions and their remarks on the chat box. See you until the next Sustainability Insight. Have a wonderful day.
You too.